welcome to another episode of Make It Make Sense with Mike and Marie. It's a true pleasure to have you guys with us today. And as always, I am joined by the wonderful, indomitable, and perfect, I just want to say, Marie Pineda. She's absolutely perfect. How you doing?
Why, thank you. You exaggerated, but please go on.
You've been busy. I've been watching you again. I always follow you on the internet, and you've been busy. It looked like you had a wonderful event for Island TV recently. Is that true?
Yes, I did. It was actually an unofficial appearance I made at the 2026 Expo. And it was the first time that I was there. And it's put together by a bunch of young up and coming Haitian entrepreneurs. And it was sort of like a car show, but instead of cars, it was small businesses, medium businesses who had a table and everybody had a story to tell, supporting each other. There was a performer there, a young Haitian artist. His name is Ayo, and he
Who you were fawning
performed.
over? Was that the guy you were fawning over?
I wasn't fawning over him. He just,
Totally
why are you
unprofessional. You mean
all in my
that interview?
business? You are all on my page. I wasn't fawning over him. He's old
Okay.
enough to be my son, but he has these lyrics and a beat. If you're Haitian,
Mhm.
you know where he says "Belle femme Creole," which is beautiful Creole
Beautiful
woman,
Creole woman.
and
Yeah.
that's me. I feel like his music.
Oh, even if you do say so yourself. Oh, and I agree 100%. You know that's how I feel.
You didn't have to
I'm just
laugh
funny.
that
It's
hard,
just funny.
Michael. I feel like Ayo's
Yes.
lyrics is
Yes.
for every beautiful, strong
Absolutely.
Haitian woman.
Yeah,
And
and
there
it's
is,
to make every Haitian woman feel
for
beautiful and
real,
feel strong. That's
beautiful
it.
love. There is not a time when I'm feeling like bump, 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 and the song comes on.
That you don't get lifted.
He gets me.
That's
He
all it
should be viral. He's
That's
viral
absolutely.
anyway, but I feel like he should be way up there internationally.
All right, folks, we're going to move on to our show now. We have a wonderful show for you today. We're going to begin by getting an update on that Haitian crisis. I want to keep this in the news because it's so important and it's easy to forget. So, Maria will give us a quick update on what's going on with that. We're also going to take a look at the latest in the Nolan Wells case. And really try to dig down into what's happening with that investigation and the latest words to come out of the mouth of one of the guys who was involved in this,
Mm.
whatever it ends up being. He's one of the friends of Nolan Wells. We'll hear from him. And then we're going to take a look at a case that probably didn't make big news, but it's out of Indiana, where a young man is being charged with the murder of his girlfriend.
Mm.
And there was a plea deal offered that was absolutely ridiculous. You're not going to believe it when you hear what this plea deal was. And we're going to chop that up and try to figure out why a prosecutor would make a deal like that. Well, the judge stepped in and threw out the deal. Now they're going to go to trial. So we'll get you caught up on the details
Yes.
of that. All right, so sit back, relax, and get your popcorn, folks, because we're ready for another episode of Make It Make Sense with Mike and Marie. All right, Marie, I want to begin with this Haitian crisis. All right, so last time we spoke, we were trying to figure out what was the next step for the executive. We know that the Supreme Court said the executive had the power to get rid of anyone on temporary protected status in this country without any reason or without oversight. So everybody was in limbo in the Haitian community and a number of other communities. About 1.5 or so people are affected by this. About 350,000
Mm-hmm.
Haitians are affected by it. So we're all on pins and needles trying to figure out what was next. And this is a little graphic sort of dealing with that, the Haitian crisis. And the key back then was these work permits that were getting ready to expire. So literally, I think maybe the day after last time we were together talking on the show, and they were extended for 2 weeks. So give us an
2 weeks.
update as to 2 weeks. You know, you were hoping for what, 3 years or something, two
Yeah.
years or something. You got 2 weeks. So talk to me about how that sort of hit in the Haitian community and where we are now.
I want to say we were all vexed and disappointed that they came up with 2 weeks. We're talking at the last hour, people are on pens and needles, didn't know if they would be allowed to work because, again, you cannot work without a work permit. And they extended for 14 days with no clear guidance on what's to come next. And you're talking about the lives of adults with people to take care of, they have to pay their rent, they have responsibilities, and they're still living on a 2 week hope with no expectation or guidance on what's going to happen next. It was very upsetting, but at the same time, we were happy that people were still allowed to work because they could have said from last Friday, we're not extending it. We're still on pins and needles.
So tell me what that means when, if in fact the end of the 2 weeks comes and they revoke those work permits, which I think would be the dumbest thing in the world to do. But let's say they did that. That would mean that all those nurses, all those folks working on those permits would no longer be able to work because companies are not going to take a chance to continue to employ people who don't have valid work permits, right?
You're exactly right. They wouldn't be allowed to let the people on the premises of their businesses to work because they would be fined. They would be in violation of the law. It's illegal to work without a work permit, and no company is going to risk that of being raided and being unable to produce a valid work permit for each and every one of their workers. I've gotten calls from people whose employers are uninformed, misinformed, or nervous and already letting people go in the anticipation of what's going on. It's it's a tragic thing that's happening with the Haitian people right now.
And it's made even more tragic by this next point. I remember last time we spoke about it, you talked about the fact that they were going to send these people back to Haiti, and you talked about how deplorable the situation was there and the conditions in Haiti were. And they America does not allow American citizens to fly to Haiti because of those dangerous conditions that are there. Yet they're willing to send folks who've been here, productive citizens from the United States, back to that country. So I wondered if perhaps that could be challenged on some sort of human rights violation.
It's very difficult, particularly if you're here under the umbrella of TPS.
Mm.
TPS is temporary protective status, and it is a status that is conferred upon people that the United States deemed their country unsafe for that moment when TPS was designated for the country. And we've already heard on from the Supreme Court that the decision to take TPS away, regardless of the basis of the reasoning, doesn't require judicial intervention or scrutiny. That is completely up to the executive, and they don't have to have good rhyme or reason. So
Mm.
to say that we can run to court and say it's inhumane based on a humanitarian basis to return people, yes, each individual person whose TPS may be subject to revocation may hire an attorney and file a motion based on humanitarian reasons, but it's a case by case scenario, and the scrutiny is intense in favor of the government because a lot of discretion is given to the government.
Yeah, what I found out, Marie, is that it's not enough to say you're sending me back to some awful, deplorable conditions.
Mhm.
You have to have a specific threat to
Yes.
you
Yes.
and or your family.
Yes.
So it becomes very difficult because again, most people are not going to be in that situation. It's more of a generalized, we can't go back to a place that is so uncivilized at the moment that would have put us and an entire family in danger. It has to be specific to them.
Absolutely, because when you look at the I-589, which is the application for asylum, right? It tells you to pick a specific criteria: your gender, your religion, your political views. They have one because the government is torturing you, torture convention. You have to explain, and they ask you what happened when you were in Haiti that made you feel so persecuted that you had to flee. So for some of those people who were admitted after the earthquake, it's hard for them to explain that because not everybody who came after the earthquake came because somebody was persecuting them. It was because the country had suffered a natural disaster. So that creates a barrier for people who came after the earthquake under those conditions to now somehow come up with a situation where they have to justify they were being persecuted in their home country. And it's very specific. Who persecuted you? Why? When? Give examples that are objective, not just subjective. Where did you come from? And then there's another question that says, what would happen if we deported you back to that home country? Explain to us. So if you were being persecuted like 10 years ago, let's say, and that's why you left Haiti and you've been here for 10 years and you lived in a particular sector, and that's where the persecution, credible fear from persecution was happening, then you have to explain, why do you think that these same people who were persecuting you then are still waiting at the border to persecute you when you come in? So
Yeah.
that's another challenge.
Yeah, it sounds like a really horrible situation. We'll
It is.
continue to pray for all of the Haitians and the folks who are affected by this, and hope for a positive outcome in this situation. All right, Marie, we want to turn the corner here and talk about the Nolan Wells case. There's been some slight developments. You guys will remember Nolan Wells is the young teen who was a football player, college football player who went with some friends on a boat to an island out in the Mississippi, a place called Horn Island. And I was surprised to find out over the last weeks or so. I wasn't aware that it's just this little deserted patch of sand, which even makes it more weird. But anyway, he goes over there with his friends. There's a problem with the boat. The friends say, look, we got to go back. He says, or at least this is the narrative that's out there. That's something we're going to talk about. The narrative is that, and this is what they're telling police, the friends, that we said we had to go back. He said he wanted to stay. He had met some girl. So we leave and we don't see him again. Next time he's seen, he is dead. And he was found in the water. We don't know if it was drowning yet, but they're saying he was found in the water. So some of the friends have talked a little bit to police. We understand that they are cooperating. The police are continuing to ask people to come forward if they know anything. This is a place that was inhabited by a lot of kids. If you see any of the videos, you'll see plenty of kids out there. So people tend to feel like somebody knows what's happening. And so just recently, one of the friends decided that he was going to speak to the media, but he did speak, Marie, just by phone. He didn't want his face out there because he's been getting, apparently all those kids have been getting death threats, and I feel bad for them. Again, we don't know if they're guilty of anything. So the fact that they have to deal with this is definitely not cool. But I want to play, he did an interview with ABC News, and I want to play a little bit of that. And there's a couple of pieces that I want to play, but I'm going to start with this. This is the report. And it's, again, as I said, by ABC News. And they're going to play a little snippet of this phone interview he did with an ABC News reporter.
We did no wrong here, and we don't understand how we're getting so much hate behind it. We all cared and loved Nolan, and nobody wanted to see Nolan die. Nobody wanted to see his life be taken so short.
All right, Kajachi, and I'll...
So we'll get back to the next one in a second, but I want to talk to you about what I just heard. A lot of people are really picking out things that the boy said. And one of them was, we didn't want to see him die. And then we didn't want to see his life be taken. Now,
that's a loaded statement.
It's a weird word, right? Now, your life can be taken by the Lord, no question. So there is an innocent explanation, but it certainly sounds like a bit of weird phrasing.
You know, that's why people need to get lawyers to make statements for them in advance, because I promise you, if they got a lawyer to make an official statement, it would have never been delivered like that. I think that statement casts guilt because nobody wanted to see Nolan die. Did somebody see him die? Nobody wanted
I missed that. You're right.
Life taken. Yeah. Who took his life? You could say, we're sorry about what happened to Nolan. We're going to cooperate with authorities to the fullest extent. We don't know what happened to him. But for you to say nobody wanted to see him die and for his life to be taken so short, words matter when you're talking about critical statements that are being put out in the public. I think it created a shadow of guilt and questions because people just blurt out things.
Yeah. And sometimes it's subconscious, right? I mean, that's how
Mhm.
people are looking at it. Like, why would you say it that way? Um, so it definitely raises suspicion.
And that was never the point of that statement, to raise suspicions. It was
No,
to
the
cast
opposite.
doubt on any involvement that they might have had.
Yes, it was the exact opposite. All right, there's another aspect of this report. Now, these are the two reporters here reporting on it on ABC News, and I want to listen to a little bit of how they describe the story. And as a former reporter, somebody who's worked in TV for many years, I want to point something out and get your thoughts on it as we listen. So
So
take a
legal
listen.
analyst and attorney Brian Buckmeyer join me now for more. So Ike, what more are we learning about why Wells stayed behind and didn't go back to the mainland with his friends?
Yeah, Kira, this has really been at the center of everything. This question, why did Nolan Wells stay behind when everyone else decided to actually leave the island? Well, now we're hearing from someone who was there that day. His childhood friend, Trayston Shepard, said that the boat that they came on experienced an electrical issue and they had to go back to shore because of that. And he says Nolan told the group he wanted to stay.
All right, so we know that story. Um,
Mm.
what I wanted to point out was, do you see how the narrative has become the boy's story?
Yes.
All the questions that are being asked of why did he stay? Do we know that he stayed? Or is that what they're saying happened? Right? That hasn't been investigated to the point where they're sure he didn't get back on that boat at some point or another. We have actually something that contradicts that from a girl on the island who said he was headed back to the boat. So rather than saying he allegedly stayed on the island, it's the narrative has become that he left the boat and was separated from his friends, which then really pushes any kind of suspicion away from the friends. What do you make of that?
I think it's a presumption of truthfulness based on the source of the information. So they're assuming and presuming that everything that comes out of the mouths of his friends is truthful, because why would a group of young, innocent boys lie about something like that? Why would they have anything to do with the untimely demise of this young man? So there are a lot of assumptions, and the assumptions, I think, come from I what I call presumptions of validity from the source of the information. So they just believe what that person or those groups of young men are saying. And a lot of people are saying that they believe it because they're just a bunch of, white boys, that it has to do with race. It's the presumption of validity based on the race of the person who's doing it and their background. How could they ever be involved in something like that? And that's what's I think making the public angry, because we're making assumptions before we investigate. And I said it last week to you, we should start the investigation from a vein of something wrong happened, someone broke the law, and then disprove it, rather than talk about it didn't happen from the beginning, because it's going to impact the way you investigate if you're if you're investigating to vindicate somebody from blame.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's exactly where I wanted to go next, because you're absolutely right. It does have implications. And it's interesting because your instincts are right. Because under the law in Mississippi, I found out,
Mm-hmm.
if investigators cannot rule out foul
See?
play, the case must be classified as suspicious. So either two things are true. Like you said, they're giving too much validity to the statements being given to them by the boys to say that nothing suspicious happened, or the nature of the body that they found may have given them a clue that this was actually a drowning. They seem to be operating under this assumption that this was not a suspicious death, whereas unless they have something solid that says it's not, they have to act like it's suspicious. And I'll tell you what happens when they
Mm-hmm.
classify it. You mentioned it changes things. It does. Number one, without that official designation,
Mm-hmm.
normally, if it's classified suspicious, the state ME investigative office gets involved.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's a whole nother level of investigation that
Mm-hmm.
gets involved.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, they're not involved. It stays local. They keep control over it. The autopsy has to be ordered. They have to do a toxicology report when it's suspicious. They don't have to, but they are doing one in this case. So there's that. The evidence has to begin to be collected as if it is a crime. I'm not sure that's happening under these circumstances. That has not been verified. It is certainly not the way it looks right now. It also has to be classified as suspicious to go out and get warrants, because without that suspicion, you're not going to get the probable cause to get the warrants to search phones and things of that nature. The other thing that has to happen when it's suspicious is once you get all the information in, it has to then be referred to a grand jury. That is going to happen in this case. So just give me quickly your thoughts on that.
I agree with everything you just said, because if you don't deem it a suspicious act potentially, then there could be evidence that's being mishandled, right? Evidence that you need to be collecting and you're not, because you're assuming that it was some type of, I want to say, natural death, but not a death caused by another, not a taking of a life
A
caused
homicide,
by
right?
another. It
Yes.
was an accident, right?
Right.
So if you're saying from the outset that it was an accident, there are certain types of evidence that you're not going to be collecting. And like you said, and like I said next week, I think a lot of answers may come from the telephones of all those teenagers involved, from
The
before,
autopsy and those
during, and
forensic
after.
telephones. Yeah, I
Yeah,
would agree.
we talked
100%.
about a flurry of phone calls between the different individuals who were there. We talked about maybe locating the young lady who he allegedly stayed back to stay with. And then there were rumors too on the internet that says they had his telephone, and
No,
I'm
they
not
did.
sure about that.
No, they absolutely had it. The
So why
family
is he staying?
went to get to the house. They had to go to their house to get his keys and his phone. When the interview, they said that we went to the house, got his phone and his keys. And they're like, why would you have his phone and keys? I mean, how much more do you need? Contradictory statements. They have his phone and his keys. Do you need much more to say that this is a bit suspicious and we need to look at this differently? And we don't need to be putting a narrative out there, national news networks saying, why did he stay behind? When that's their story, that's not the official story. So all those things. Now, I wanted to ask you this because I know you were a former prosecutor. What's supposed to be happening today is they're supposed to be meeting with the district attorney. As I said, they do. District attorney's office has said they plan to present whatever evidence is uncovered in the investigation to the grand jury. But they're meeting with the family today. Any sense of what that conversation might be like?
I think they're going to reassure the family that an investigation is going to happen. It's going to be fair, that they're going to have no conflicts of interest, and they are going to try the best possible avenues to get to the bottom of it, from going over what happened in the autopsy, from doing all of the witness interviews, and then even perhaps getting warrants for the telephones of everyone involved. And that they don't need to worry that this is going to be swept under the rug, because the authorities are doing everything they could to independently verify that there was no foul play. So I'm sure that the attorneys for his parents are going to be at any meeting and basically speak on behalf of the parents to make sure that everything is being done right, because there's already a big spotlight on this case, and it would be foolish for the authorities who are tasked to investigate to not pay particular special attention to every aspect of this investigation.
Yeah, that's why Ben Crump's involved in the case
Yeah.
representing the family, because that's exactly what he is trying to do. But I do want to say this before we move on. And you talk about, or at least DA talks about, we're going to present whatever evidence comes out of the investigation to the grand jury. First of all, grand juries are a sham. You can make whatever outcome you want based on it, because it's a one-sided, secret proceeding. So you can make it the outcome any way you want. I think Morgenthaler in New York said many, many years ago, you can indict a ham sandwich if you wanted to. Well, the
Indeed.
opposite is true as well. You cannot indict it if that's not what you want to happen. And the evidence presented to the grand jury is only as good as that's going to be collected. So again, if they haven't classified it as suspicious, if they're not vigorously investigating it as a crime, how good is that and how voluminous is that evidence going to be anyway?
You know what? It could be just, okay, we're going to present it to the grand jury because we don't want them to not think that we are taking this seriously. We're going to leave it into the hands of these individuals on the grand jury. Their identities are secret. It's a secret proceeding. Nobody else is presenting the case except for the prosecution. So it is a one-sided investigation and presentation. And it is up to the prosecutors to bring forth everything they have to create that level of proof. The burden is probable cause. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think the coroner's report is key. And this
It's
is
everything.
why
Yeah.
his attorneys want an independent coroner
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Because
investigate as
the
well.
evidence is going to be in that body, right? At the end of the day, I think,
Absolutely.
that body's going to tell a story. And quite frankly, I'm not rooting for it to be one thing or the other. We just want the truth, right? His mother said he was a good swimmer, although there have been a number of reports talking about they interviewed like a boat captain out there who was a regular in those waters, talking about how difficult those waters can be. So could be possible he decided to jump in for whatever reason and the waters got him, and things like that absolutely do happen. Even good swimmers drown. So any of these things are in play at the moment.
It's just a lot, because as you're even explaining the possible scenarios that, he jumped in, but they're saying he was never on the boat,
Yeah.
right? So if they're saying he never made it back, he stayed back and stayed, there's a big problem here.
Yeah, there's some blind spots. We
Right.
don't quite know
And
what's
listen,
happening.
I live for my phone. If I went
Yes.
somewhere with, let's say, you,
Yeah.
and you said, okay, Marie, we got to leave now, Horn Island, because our boat, there's something wrong with the electricals and we got to go back. And I
Right.
meet a guy and I'm like,
You meet
I
that
met
young
somebody,
guy that you
Michael.
like so much,
You could
the
go ahead
beautiful
without me.
Creole.
Why would I not have my phone with me? First
The
of all,
first thing you
Michael,
would say is, Mike, let me have my phone. I'm going to
let
stick
me get
around
my
this way.
phone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because
Everyone knows that.
really, my daughter has my location. So
Everyone knows that.
Tamara would be like, Mom, what are you doing on Horn Island? And when are you coming back? Are you still with Michael? Like, what's going on? She would clock me.
Of
My
course.
point is, not to make light of
Yes.
it. Why was his phone not with him?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. These are definitely questions that I think should have caused this to be called a suspicious death, but obviously it wasn't. So we'll continue to wait for that autopsy. This is a small community, so I don't know how long it's going to take. We thought it was going to be early this week that those autopsies would come back. They have not come back yet, but as soon as they do, like you said, there'll be lots of questions. Either there'll be more questions or lots of questions answered, and we can sort of all rest easy and move on. All right, Marie. We're going to move on now to another story. You and I know we hear a lot about domestic violence victims. I like to see justice in domestic violence cases. And this is a domestic violence case that I wanted to bring to light. It happened in Indiana. Well, it was a young man named Derek Pixley. Now, Derek Pixley was involved with a woman, and this was back in 2022, and a history of domestic violence. They find her body in the woods, and he's there. There's an existing emergency order of protection against him that she had gotten, and he says he just came across the body. So your antenna has to go up. But he's not arrested because she was shot in the neck. She came to eventually, but didn't identify him. She refused to identify him while she was in the hospital. She lived for 3 months, and then she passed away. So he's let go, and actually the case goes cold. The investigation apparently was bundled a little bit by the local authorities. Eventually, the state authorities get involved. They jump in, start investigating, and almost immediately in 2025, when they get involved, they arrest Derek Pixley. And he's charged with the murder of his girlfriend, Brittany Bauman. Now, what happens next is just incredible. He's charged with murder. He's facing between 50 and 65 years on that murder charge.
Yes.
They reduce that. They have a plea deal with him, and they reduce it drastically to a lower level felony, which would have gave him roughly 5 to 6 years. He had served 2 already by the time the deal was done. So he would have walked out of prison in roughly 3 years. It was they were dropping it to a reckless homicide charge. So I just want to get your thoughts on this case, because what happened next was the judge threw out that plea deal. And that's why I wanted to highlight this case. The judge said that is just insufficient. He had a hearing. The mother of the victim spoke. He was moved by the mother of the victim. She said, I can't deal with this. This is not right. My daughter died. We know he killed him. Can't do a deal like this. The judge agreed, threw out the plea deal. They're set to go to trial in November.
I was very surprised that the judge got involved, because we see this all the time where you have a crime. Sometimes it's the crimes involving co-conspirators, right? And you have one of them, who's arrested and one who's talking. And they get in bed with the one who's talking, and that person gets such an amazing deal. And sometimes we feel like it's not fair at all, because sometimes it's the person who actually committed the murder, and based on their cooperation, they get a sweet deal. It's not the same thing, but sometimes, when a judge with a lot of discretion in his courtroom chooses to exercise this and gets involved in a negotiation between defense and prosecution, it must really be bad. The facts of the case, the way the person was murdered, for the judge to just sit back and see the prosecutor and the defense attorney come to a deal, which would basically free this man up in 3 years, and a life was lost. The person suffered. There was an order of protection naming him as an aggressor against the victim, and he happens to show up in a secluded area next to the woman to say, I just got here and saw her shot in the neck, when he allegedly was going around throwing threats at her and telling people this is what's going to happen and that's what's going to happen. This is sort of like a smoking gun, his own mouth. And then now he's free for almost 2-3 years, and you want to give him a deal? There had to be something seriously wrong with the prosecutorial case, where they really felt like if they brought it to the jurors, that they would be far from proving his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and he probably would be acquitted. So you sort of have to balance, what you got in your hands, how you could fix the investigation. It's an old case. Maybe something was botched, and they thought that he would just walk out. Better to get 3 years, plead to a felony, have that on your record, and walk out and walk out a felon, than to just walk out with a not guilty. That's
Yeah.
probably what happened.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm going to go through some of that now, because your instincts are exactly right. And that happens to be Derek Pixley there. And that picture was taken the day that the judge threw out his little deal, that he thought he was, got this sweetheart deal, and he found out, nope, you're going to trial. But you make a great point, because to make a deal like that, you can vilify prosecutors, but they're making an assessment of the evidence in the case. And like you said, they're saying we'd rather get this conviction than take him to court and not get any at all, because there were problems with the case. Well, you did have the history of domestic violence, and you certainly had threats that he had told other people about. And the mother was ready to testify about all the problems the girl had. She was still living with him. And unfortunately, in the eyes of a jury, that could be problematic. Apparently, there were severe.
Even though she had a protective order, she was still in the house with him.
Yes. So that's problematic, and again, it's unfortunate. We've moved, we've come a long way with domestic violence, but things like that are difficult to present to a jury when you talk about fear of someone or how bad someone is involved in a situation. There was severe chain of custody issues. A lot of the evidence was lost or bungled, which is why eventually the state police had to get involved. And the guy who took over for the state police said this was so badly mangled that he didn't even think they could salvage it, but apparently they did. There was apparently an alternate suspect. The girl, initially, she didn't want to name the boyfriend, this guy here. She named some other guy who happened to be a jailhouse informant guy who they all kind of knew, and said that he was the one that did it. The mother claimed that she was under a lot of medication at the time, and there was a lot of fear because she didn't feel that the police could protect her from her boyfriend. That's why she didn't want to name him. But there was that out there. They never investigated the guy. So the defense sort of jumped on that and said this was a horrible investigation. So the judge may have done the right thing. And like you said, he may not have. What if this guy walks out of court?
That is a very big risk that the judge is forcing the prosecutors to have to confront. I
Yeah.
wonder if it's going to be the same judge that tries the case that ruled that
Yes, it will.
that plea deal. Okay, so we could pretty
No, it
much know
absolutely is.
that judge is never going to give a judgment of
Yeah,
acquittal.
and I think there's enough evidence here that they'd get over that hump. The problem is
Mm,
the reasonable doubt issue, because also that informant we were talking about, apparently he lied about his alibi for where he was when the young woman was shot. So there's that as well. Why is he lying about his alibi? Were the two of them involved? Who knows? Right. So all these things really raise questions as to be able to get to a reasonable doubt, get past that reasonable doubt standard. And the last thing I want to talk about is what I think this really shows. And what I think is important to remember here is we have had a movement over the last 20 years in our
mm,
system to really give victims a voice.
yes.
And this is one of those cases that really, it was the mother's testimony or her statement during the hearing about the plea deal that caused the judge to say, I just can't do this. I can't accept this deal. This mother is just too heartbroken. These are the real lives that are being affected. These are the real victims. And he decided to roll it over to trial. Hopefully, again, it's the right thing to do. But I just want to make clear just how important it is to keep victims involved in the process and to give them this type of power.
And unfortunately, it's not the norm because many cases that are prosecuted by a prosecutor's office, they want input from the victims' families, but that's not what dispositively determines what plea offer they give out if they determine we are going to do a plea. Because they say, it's not the family's charges to press, it is the people of the state of blank blank against a particular defendant. So they do take into account how the family feels, but at the end of the day, if they want to give a deal based on their assessment from their prosecutorial perspective, they don't really make the family's opinion that important. And it's refreshing that the judge in this case said, hold up, let's make it make sense here. And had an opportunity to hear the mother and to look at the evidence that they have from a lawyer perspective. And the judge himself said, there's enough here for a dice to be rolled, for justice to happen. Let's let the jurors figure it out instead of cowering away and letting this man literally get away with murder. Kudos to that judge, because that's not the norm.
No, it's not. And you're
No.
right. You're 100% right. Part of the problem with the system is that it's that, there's so many cases on the docket that plea deals, really, I think 98.5% of cases do end up in plea deals. And caught up in that is a lot of innocent people choosing pleas because they don't want longer sentences. And guys like this who fall through the cracks with these types of deals.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it is good to see that there are judges, there are victims taking advantage of the opportunity to have a say. And again, you're right. They can't change the outcome. If the prosecutor thinks it's absolutely the right thing to do, they're the specialists. They look at the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
They know what the right thing to do is, but they do have a voice, and it's important that victims use their voice, especially in cases like this where it's domestic violence and the person is dead and cannot speak for themselves.
And, I just want to add too, unfortunately, with some DA's offices, it's what's winnable.
Yes.
And if
Yes.
it's not winnable, they're not trying to do it
Yeah.
because they don't want to be that DA's office who put that man through that and then can't get a conviction. So they really go after the cases that they can win, which is really not supposed to be what our system is about. It's about justice.
Yes. But careers don't advance on justice. They
Exactly.
advance on convictions.
Yeah,
Right? And that's really what it's all about.
unfortunately.
So that's how it goes. And you were an insider in the prosecutor's office. So that's exactly what happens. Well,
Mhm.
all right, Marie, it's been fantastic talking to you as always. I want to wish you a fantastic day. I hope you continue to enjoy all of the endeavors that you're getting involved in. Thank you so much, folks out there, for watching us as well. Please continue to tune in. And we're trying to get our subscribership up to about 1,000. So please, if you're watching this and enjoy any part of it, Make sure you like and subscribe. We're on YouTube. We're on Substack. So make sure you like and subscribe so that we can reach those levels by the end of the summer. That's our goal. All right, Marie, any last words for our audience?
Continue to watch, support, like, and share. And please tell Michael to stop getting in my business. Stop going on my Instagram and blowing me up when I'm just trying to live my life.
Then. Stop putting it out there. I love following your page. I'm living vicariously through you. It's incredible. You're living a wonderful, wonderful life. All right, folks, have a great one, Marie. You too. And we'll see you again next time on Make It Make Sense with Mike and